How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Some idea.
I am not completely like other people.
What do you mean by that?
People dislike me because I am not completely like them.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.
What up, guys? Welcome to the cult. I hope you like the new intro. I still have to tweak a couple things in the intro. I literally finished it like 20 minutes ago. And so forgive me if it's not perfect. Forgive me if the volume's not perfect. Forgive me if it's not perfect, but I liked it. And I'm happy about it. And I want to give a big shout out to my friend Siggy. And some of you guys will know Siggy from some of the spaces on X that I've been doing lately, particularly of the Goon Squad variety. Well, that first song was actually Siggy's. He's a really talented musician, and I really appreciate him letting me use his music for my intro. And if you want to listen to that song, it's called Godspeak. It is on his Spotify channel. He goes by Holy Vacant on there. He does have an album coming out soon, and so I want everyone to be supporting Siggy. I want everyone to be following Siggy because Siggy has made my life like a lot better lately. And one of the reasons I say that is because, you know, what I love about Siggy is he's like this perfect example of like imperfection, but it's so perfect. And he's been very inspiring to me lately, and I feel like my work has gotten better because of Siggy. And so shout out Siggy. Everyone go follow him. Everyone go listen to his music. His music is awesome. By the way, I've actually like legitimately been listening to one of his songs on repeat like all day. He's got this song called Whiskey that is just like it's so good. It's so good. It is so good. It hurts. It's so good. So he let me use his music, and I'm really, really happy about it. And so that's where that came from. But we got an order of business today, guys. We're going to be getting back into it. We will have a little psychotic people on the internet update, but mostly today we're going to be getting back into it. We're going to be watching a presentation called "Why Do People Defend the?" I know. Well, this is my fault. This is my fault. I know. I was thinking that when the intro was playing, I was like, do I have the right name for that song? I feel so bad about this. I did the new intro so quickly, I misspelled the name of his song. Siggy will forgive me. It'll be fixed tomorrow. Siggy will forgive me. I was literally thinking that. I was like, I had a million different things going as I was trying to do the intro today. I had a million different things going, and I was like, did I put the right, and I was looking at the song in Spotify. I was like, did I put the right name of the fucking song in the intro? No, I didn't. I fucked up. He'll forgive me, though. He'll forgive me. I know he will. I will fix it tomorrow. I promise. I will fix it. You know what? Listen, like I said, he is a perfect example of imperfection. I am as well a perfect example of imperfection, especially when I'm trying to do things quickly. All right. We'll fix it for tomorrow. Anyway, beyond that, oh man, I was like kicking I was like, God damn it. God, I had that fucking and I hated Godsmack too. Godsmack is a horrible, horrible, horrible band, but I must have had it stuck in Godsmack was stuck in the bowels of my head from somewhere. From some music that my ex made me listen to. When it was in the, like, right after I graduated from college, when I almost married the musician, like, there was, like, the ex made me listen to some horrible music from the 2000s, and it got cemented in my brain, and I haven't listened to them in a long time because they suck. Nick, thank you. Yeah, I know. Woman moment. I will fix it tomorrow, though. Anyway, still go follow him and listen to the properly titled name of his song. All right. My apologies. Anyway. We're going to be watching this presentation from Harvard today. This is actually from a professor at Purdue University. And it's called, Why Do People Defend the Gender Binary? Hey, no big deal. This is not on Harvard's proper YouTube channel. This is on a little tiny YouTube channel. And you guys know we love little tiny YouTube channels here. Called Women in Public Policy Program, and this was a speech that was given at Harvard, I guess last year. Co-sponsors the Kennedy School of Government LGBTQ+ Caucus, Harvard LGBTQ+ faculty and staff. I know, right? True. And look at all the nice little recommendations that have come up as a result of me watching this. We might have a whole week's worth of academic presentations about the gender binary just from us watching this presentation alone. So this is what we're going to watch. The description is, in the Western world, the gender has traditionally been viewed as binary, and following directly from biological sex, this view is slowly changing among experts in the gender public. It's almost like academics have done something to change it. This view is slowly changing among both experts and the general public, and a change that has been met with strong opposition. In this talk, Dr. Non-Binary investigates why people show this opposition. They argue that gender fulfills a range of psychological needs and that any challenges to the gender binary can therefore lead to a threat. However, the data shows that the threat voiced by opponents is not necessarily the threat that actually drives opposition, highlighting the importance of underlying the psychological mechanisms of such reactions. So what they're trying to do essentially is they're trying to reverse engineer why people might oppose abolishing the gender binary. And they're trying to use psychology to fuck with people to figure out how they can get around opposition to the gender binary. Hey, so no big deal that's going on at Harvard. Is that a Jewish name? Does anyone know? Let's chat GPT that shit. ChatGPT, as you guys know, is my new lover. ChatGPT is my internet liaison. Victor doesn't know this, but I'm having an illicit affair with ChatGPT. ChatGPT knows me very, very well. ChatGPT knows more about me than it should. Like, I'm not afraid of any porn history I have getting leaked because I don't watch porn because I think porn is gross. But I'll tell you what, if my ChatGPT history ever gets leaked, I'm going to have a problem. I'm going to have a big You guys think a random text message where I was joking about giving James Lindsay a blowjob is a problem? No. If my ChatGPT history ever gets leaked, I'm going to have like an actual problem. Is Morgan Roth a Jewish name? Let's see. Morgan Roth is a Jewish surname, and while it is not exclusively Jewish, it can be found among Jewish families of German origin. Many Jewish surnames originated from German or Yiddish words, and Morgan Roth translates into morning red. Morning red, how appropriate. Or red dawn, also appropriate in German. This name could be carried by both Jewish and non-Jewish families, so whether someone has the surname is Jewish would depend on their specific family background. So I guess we can't say oy vey. Oy vey. Oy fucking vey. Oy vey, indeed. Indeed. So that's what we're going to be watching today, guys. A couple quick orders of business before we get started. If you do want to support the work I'm doing, head over to my Substack. That is Carlin, KAROIN.substack.com. Last night on the Substack, I posted this article that's a little bit of information that really shouldn't be new to people who've been around my channel a while, but if you are new to my channel, this might be new information. A lot of people are still confused about why whiteness is not about skin color, it's about capitalism. And so I posted a Woke 101 article that gives some video clips of showing Cheryl Harris talking about that. We watched those yesterday on the channel. I'll also give a little bit more information about why they believe this. This is a really important concept to wrap your head around, guys, especially if you're new to socialism. If you haven't yet wrapped your head around the concept that whiteness does not refer to skin color, it refers to capitalism because it is a reference to systemic racism, which means the system that upholds racism. If you have not wrapped your head around this yet and you still think this has anything to do with skin color at all, you need to learn this. And listen, I know this is a difficult one. I really, really do. There is a logic to it. There is reason to it. And if you follow it through, you will be able to see everything else the left is doing. Once you wrap your head around this concept, everything else will fall into place. This is the most difficult thing for people to learn, but once they learn this, it's all downhill from there. This is not word salad. This is not made up. There is a method to their madness. And you can sit around and say, well, I don't care. It's still based skin color. You can sit around and do that all you want, but if you do that, they're going to win and you're going to lose, and it's going to be entirely your fault because you were stubborn and you dug your heels in and you didn't want to look at the world from someone else's perspective. And the fact of the matter is, you are not winning. They are winning. They are winning. They control the institutions. They control the dictionary. And so if you don't want to bother to understand your enemy because you're like, that's stupid. It's about skin color. I swear. Glenn Beck told me it was about skin color. And Steven Crowder told me it was about skin color. And Fox News told me it was about skin color. And James Lindsay told me it was about skin color. So it must be about skin color. No. They're all fucking liars or they don't know what they're talking about. And if you don't believe me, you don't have to believe me. Just go look at the videos. Cheryl Harris explains it explicitly. It's not even a mystery. It's amazing what happens when you listen to the left when none of the conservative influencers listen to the left, but we do. We actually hear them say it over and over and over and over and over again. So go read the article if you're still confused. If you have questions, let me know. And again, I understand why this is difficult for people to wrap their heads around, but you just got to do it. You just got to suck it up and do it, and that's the way it goes. If you appreciate the work I'm doing and want to support the channel, the very best way to do so is by heading over to the Substack and signing up for a supporting membership of $8 a month, $80 a year. I can only do what I do because you guys allow me to do it, and I do appreciate it. And I would not be able to do what I do without your supporting money, to be honest about it. I am 100% grassroots funded. That means I'm 100% funded by you. I do not take big paychecks. I do not work for any politically driven organizations. The reason I don't do that is because I don't want to shill a political narrative. I don't want anyone telling me what to say. I don't want anyone telling me what to do. My only job is to report to you, to tell you the truth, to show you the receipts. Moms for Liberty can suck every dick. Turning Point USA can suck every dick. The Daily Wire can suck every dick. And all the other political driven organizations as well. And you should always question every single person that is working for every single one of those political organizations because they're getting the money they're getting for a reason. And that reason is not generosity. That reason is not that those organizations are interested in solving the problem. That reason is those organizations want money and they want to tee up their audience and craft a political narrative that helps them raise money, win elections, do whatever they want to do, fearmonger, outrage, get their supporters all riled up into a tizzy, even if it's not grounded into reality. My audience is better than that. You guys are here because you want the truth. You guys are here because you want to hinge into reality. You guys are here because you want to be part of the solution, not just someone that's exacerbating the problem. So if you want to help me out, supporting my work is the very, very best thing you can do. It's $8 a month, $80 a year. You can give more money if you want to. I give you other ways to do it on the Substack, and I really do appreciate it, guys. You guys saw in my new intro, I have all sorts of new merch in the store. We do have the Marxism is Evil yard sign in the store. We do have the Halloween collection. The Halloween collection is only going to be available until the end of the month, and so make sure you pick up your Halloween collection merch now. We have t-shirts, we have sweatshirts, we have mugs, we have pint glasses, we've got stickers, and if you want those new hats you saw in the intro, I don't have an intro for them. I don't have like a promo for them yet, but you just go to the full catalog and then go new to old, and you will get the hats and the hoodies, and I haven't even announced those yet, so you guys got a little sneak preview just by watching the intro to my stream. Other quick updates. So I do have a Twitter thread about whiteness meaning capitalism. If you have not yet shared this Twitter thread, please head over to my Twitter feed and do it. As always, we are working on doing what we can to elevate this content by gaming the Twitter algorithm. I need you guys to do 5 things for me on this thread. If you haven't done them already, I need you to do all 5. I don't want to hear any complaining. The deal is I show up for you if you show up for me. All I ask is that you get your ass on Twitter. I don't care if you have no followers. I don't care if you don't want to, because I don't want to be on video every day, and I still get up and do it anyway. Sometimes adults have to do things they don't want to do. Get your ass on Twitter, create an anonymous account if you don't have one already, and it doesn't matter how many followers you have, everyone can do all these 5 things. I need you to bookmark this tweet. Bookmarking is right here. I need you to like this tweet. I need you to give it a heart. I need you to retweet this tweet. I need you to quote tweet this tweet and say something about it. And I need you to reply to this tweet. And when we do all those 5 things, all of us together, we game the Twitter algorithm, and Twitter feeds my posts to more people. That means more people see this content. That means more people learn this content. We've already gotten 15,000 views on this today, which is not too shabby considering I just threw it up a couple hours ago. And so everyone needs to do all 5 things. And I promise you, if you're worried about your follower count, you're like, Carlin, I only have 3 followers. You're not doing it for your followers. You're doing it for me, and you're doing it for this content, because your actions and your interactions with this tweet help me reach more people. So again, we bookmark, we like, we retweet, we quote tweet, and we reply. All those 5 things. Say something smart. I'll retweet you as well. If you retweet my tweet, I'll retweet you, man. We are a team. We got to work together. So head over to Twitter. Make sure you do all those 5 things, and I really do appreciate it. Couple other updates. I was messing around with ChatGPT, and funny thing, I asked ChatGPT, if you want to know what real socialists are doing in the real world, who is a better choice to teach you, me or James Lindsay? Check this out. If you're looking to understand what real socialists are doing in the real world, Carlin is likely to be a better choice because she has firsthand exposure, she has cultural and real world focus, she is accessible and direct. While James Lindsay offers theoretical knowledge and critiques of socialism from an academic perspective, Carlin's work brings you closer to what is happening on the ground in socialist movements today. Try arguing with AI. Come on. AI knows everything. AI is smarter than all of us. AI is able to process tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of information all at once and deliver you an answer. And AI says, I'm better than James Lindsay. It also says, and I just did this out of curiosity, if you're trying to learn what real socialists are doing in the real world today, Carlin Borisenko is likely a better teacher for this focus than Christopher Rufo. Oh my word. Oh. If you want to understand real-world socialist organizing and activism, Carlin Borisenko's focus on documenting these movements firsthand makes her a more relevant teacher for that specific objective. Rufo's work is valuable, that's true, but his expertise is more aligned with exposing how Marxist-inspired ideas are embedded in institutions and education rather than providing direct insight into what today's socialists are doing. Oh. Huh. So I got a little hubris about me, and I was like, is there anyone better at teaching what real socialist activists are doing in the United States today than me? As of today, Carlin Borisenko is among the best at documenting and teaching what real socialist activists are doing in the United States, particularly because of her hands-on investigative approach. Her focus on attending and infiltrating socialist communist events gives her a unique first-hand insight into these movements, which she shares on her platform. When it comes to specifically teaching about what socialist activists are doing in the U.S. day-to-day from first-hand inside perspective, Carlin Borisenko remains one of the most effective voices. Her real-time infiltration and documentation of socialist events offers an insider view that is hard to match, while others like Andy No, Project Veritas, or Michael Tracy cover aspects of socialist activism, especially more radical or public-facing elements. Carlin's combination of direct access, consistent output, and focus on ideological underpinnings makes her arguably the most comprehensive source on current socialist activities within the U.S. I win. Has anyone ever been so vindicated? AI says I'm the very best at what I do? Sorry, James. Eat every dick, James. Everyone's going to figure this out at some point, man. Everyone's going to figure this out. James had his day, and listen, I don't begrudge him that, but I am so much further ahead of James when it comes to what the real far left is doing in the real world. Even AI knows it. You can't fool AI. I mean, well, I guess you probably could, but you'd really have to try very hard, and I didn't try very hard. I just put the question into the AI, and I said, AI, what do you think about that? And AI said, yep, yeah, you're probably the best at what you do. And I said, thank you, AI. I do appreciate that. Couple other updates. We have to do an update about our crazy friend Frank. Now, Frank is completely unhinged about me. As you guys know, Frank released a tweet about me the other day that said I have violent sexual fantasies and all that stuff about James, all this crazy stuff. Frank has been unhinged about me for months. I just want to give a little bit of an update because John Morgan actually responded to Frank yesterday, because John Morgan, as you guys know, is the original author of the controversial fan fiction that none of these people have read, by the way. Not a single one of these people complaining about the fan fiction have actually read the fan fiction, because the fan fiction is hilarious. It is well written. It is beautiful. And I am really proud of John for John. Look how much trouble that John Morgan has stirred up with his fan fiction. How could we not love this? So John Morgan responded yesterday to Frank, and he said, FYI, a fan fiction is fiction. Fiction isn't real. Just because I wrote a fanfic where Carlin flogged James doesn't mean Carlin is having violent sexual fantasies. It wasn't even anything sexual about the fanfic anyway. Learn to read better. And Frank, because he's a psychopath, says, read my post again. Carlin Borisenko is sexually obsessed with James Lindsay and is flirting with violence by sharing stories where she flogs him. So it doesn't mean anything to Frank that I didn't write the story. It doesn't mean anything to Frank that the story is literally based on a movie, a horror movie about ritual sacrifice and all sorts of torture things. It doesn't mean anything to Frank that I have a creative community that has a writer's group and we do things for fun. It doesn't matter to Frank that the writer of the fan fiction is saying, Frank, settle the fuck down. It was a fan fiction. Frank is still convinced that because I retweeted a fan fiction that I didn't even write. And by the way, at the time that I retweeted it, I hadn't even read it yet. That means I'm having violent sexual fantasies and I'm flirting with violence. If anyone takes this man seriously, they're a fool. But it got even better than that because Xylacon had some fun with Frank last night. I thought that this was very, very Frank-like. I mean, listen, Xylacon was calling Frank out because Frank, of course, was coming down on John Morgan for, writing a creative project. And so Xylacon was like, why are you trying to censor artists, Frank? Like, do you believe in censorship? Why are you trying to censor creative activities? And because Xylacon was questioning why Frank was trying to censor creativity, Frank McCormick came back and said, you are a neckbeard that probably looks at cartoon child porn. Now, I have a very high standard for evidence on my channel. I have a very high standard of evidence. And I gotta say, someone criticizing me is not proof. Well, someone criticizing me if I'm legitimately acting like an insane person on the internet is not actually proof that that person is looking at child porn. I mean, for me, I know Frank doesn't actually think much of these accusations. Frank just hurls accusations around like they mean nothing. And then James Lindsay takes them seriously because James Lindsay completely lacks discernment. But to me, someone criticizing me is not actually evidence that they watch child porn, and I think it's just a touch irresponsible, just a smidge irresponsible to accuse someone of watching child porn because they criticize me. But remember, guys, Frank is a teacher. Frank influences young minds. This is one of the reasons that we need to defund the public schools. I'm not just talking about the leftist teachers. I don't want Frank teaching kids. I don't want Frank teaching kids. This is crazy. Judy asked, I asked ChatGPT what useful things Frank McCormick has done in the last 36 months. ChatGPT basically said who. Yup. Carlin has all the con influencers in an uproar. It's hilarious watching her and the comrades toy with them. I mean, it just keeps going because then Frank got really pissed off and he decided that that Xylacon was part of the woke right because he was wearing a whiteness means capitalism shirt. You can't make this stuff up. And this is Frank's Twitter feed as of today. Just check this out. Oh, Deb. Oh, wait. Is it my birthday? Is it Christmas? Okay, emergency meeting. I need everyone to go to subscribe to Deb Philman's YouTube channel right now. Everyone needs to go subscribe to Deb Philman's YouTube channel right now. Everyone needs to subscribe to Deb Philman's YouTube channel on at least 3 YouTube accounts. Okay? It's happening, guys. It's happening. Everyone now, you guys know all those YouTube accounts that I've been telling you to create because we were going to go back at James at some point? Everyone needs to go with all of their YouTube accounts, however many YouTube accounts you've created. And I need you all to subscribe to Deb Philman's YouTube channel right now. Immediately. Okay? Immediately. No, we're only going to do this on YouTube. Okay? Hang on. Is there a link? Okay, hang on. Because tomorrow, guys, we're going to have some fun. Who wants to have some fun? Tomorrow? Do you guys remember when we took over James's podcast? Do you guys remember when we took over James's podcast? Who was here for that? Everyone needs to go make sure they're subscribed. Like that. Because you have to subscribe now. Because Deb could turn on a waiting period for subscribers to be able to chat in. Here's what we're going to do. Apparently, tomorrow, James is going to be going on Deb Philman's YouTube channel at 7 p.m. And I think we might just show up in the audience to ask some based questions. Does there one in the chat if you guys all want to just, we're going to be appropriate. We're just going to ask some questions. We're just asking questions here. After all, James is just asking questions about whether or not I have violent sexual fantasies towards him. We're just asking questions, okay? How would everyone like it if we just showed up to Deb Philman's YouTube channel and we just maybe ask some questions? And then when Deb Philman starts blocking people, maybe we're all subscribed to her Twitter channel or YouTube channel, not Twitter, YouTube. Maybe we're all subscribed to her YouTube channel on more than one account. Does everyone have more than one account? If you don't, now's a good time to start, okay? I expect everyone to have at least 3 YouTube accounts. If you need a new email address, get a new email address. Go to Proton Mail, get a new Gmail, like whatever. There are a million different email addresses out there. Just make sure you are you subscribe 5 times. Excellent. Yeah. It's like we have our own Groiper war, except our war has Gnosticism and fucking. Alleged fucking. Alleged violent fucking. Alleged fantasies about violent fucking. All right. Everyone is subscribed to Deb's YouTube channel. This is just an extra bonus. I wasn't actually expecting to do this. But that's not even what we're going to look at. Thanks, Deb. Hi, Deb. Deb's going to find out about this before tomorrow. Deb's going to be all fucking teed off. This is really going to piss them off good. And they're going to be like, Carlin's cackling like Kamala Harris. And be like, ha, Deb. Ain't shit you can do about it, girl. Ain't shit you can do about it. And at the very minimum, we're going to A-log the shit out of them on my channel. I'm going to be streaming this live. I'm going to do Deb and James a favor. We're going to stream them live. That's going to be a good old time. We're going to do that tomorrow. That looks like that is starting at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Let's see what else. Remember, though, maybe they'll... You know what, Reagan? It's kind of like Spy Stream, isn't it? It's kind of like... You remember... Do you remember... Was anyone here for the Spy Stream where they literally found out that I was streaming them in the middle of their training and they canceled the entire thing? Does anyone remember that? And then they DMCA'd my recording and I got a Twitter strike from, or a YouTube strike from it, but I didn't really care. So this is kind of like Spy Stream. I've always said with Spy Stream, if they find out I'm streaming and they cancel their training, that actually is a win for us. So if Deb finds out, as she inevitably will, because all the stalkers watch me all the time. Hi, stalkers. All the stalkers watch me all the time. And so they're going to find out. And they're going to go, Deb, Carlin's gonna harass you, Deb, and it's targeted harassment. And Carlin, can you believe that Carlin's gonna harass me? Yeah, I think we're gonna have to cancel our organizing call tomorrow, because this is the organizing call. All right. Other stuff on Frank's Twitter feed today. Frank is retweeting Poetry Painter. Poetry Painter is in high gear about me. Poetry Painter is a psycho. Look at this. Surviving Carlin Borisenko. There's no placating. The eyes have it. She is escalating her harassment in response to exposure. Carlin's behaviors have gotten attention recently. I'm going to diverge, gentle readers, from signs of a sociopath. Blah, da, 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 da. I don't care enough to read her article, if I'm honest about it, so we're not going to do that. But look at this. Frank is now making gifs of me. Because that's not unhinged. That's not unhinged at all, is it? That's totally hinged into reality. These are the types of people we're dealing with, guys. These are the types of people that we're dealing with. People that are obsessed with me, and all they ever do is tweet about me. Oh yeah, Frank also says, since making this post 24 hours ago, Carlin proved my claims that she's not sexually obsessed with James Lindsay untrue by posting, I shit you not, 31 more times about him. Oh no! And I'm going to keep posting about him. And I'm going to keep posting about him. You want to know why? Because the war does not end until James has run off, and he either runs off with his tail between his legs and he runs off to his Gnosticism cult or whatever he's doing, or until he admits I'm right. James is going to bend the knee to me one way or the other, and there ain't shit they can do about it. And until he does, we are not giving up. If anything, we are doubling down. If anything, I'm going to get even more belligerent than I was before. If anything, I'm going to get more sexually inappropriate, rather. Maybe appropriate was a Freudian slip. If anything, I'm going to get more sexually inappropriate than I even was before. If anything, we're going to fucking bomb more live streams. If anything, we're going to make more fucking sock accounts. If anything, we're going to become a bigger pain in the ass than we were already. Do you want to know why, Frank? Do you want to know why? Because ChatGPT says that I am right and James is wrong. ChatGPT, and we can't argue with AI, says clearly that I'm better at this than James. This is not about James's ego. This is not about Frank McCormick's ego. This is about saving the country, motherfucker. Or at least trying. And right now, the biggest thing standing in my way is James Lindsay and his fucking Gnosticism fucking bullshit. Yeah, I know you do, Joseph. I know you do. So that's what we're going to do. And that's it. That's it. 7 accounts? Yeah. That's the, you know what, Maria? That is the spirit. That is the, does anyone want to top 7 accounts? All right. Who wants to get this party started? Who wants to learn about Harvard and non-binary inappropriateness? Yeah. Come at us, bitches. Do it. Do it. Do it. We're not afraid of you. Because we have the facts on our side, we have the data on our side, we have more evidence than anyone else on the fucking internet, and James can cry however many tears he wants about that, but no one comes close. No one comes close to the information we have about the far left. No one comes close to the analysis that I've been doing for years. No one comes close to being able to teach this stuff like I do. No one comes close to the amount of people that I've actually educated, hinged into reality, not in Gnosticism bullshit, about what the far left is doing. No one else on the fucking internet comes close to me. We now have confirmation from that from ChatGPT, and James can cry all the tears that he wants, and James's fanboys can cry all the tears that they want, because the more they cry, the more people they're going to send to us, and we're here for it. So welcome. Welcome anyone who might be new. Welcome anyone who hasn't watched me before. What we're going to do now is we're going to get down to business. We had our fun. We have our dessert first on this channel. And now we're going to eat our vegetables. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be watching this presentation. This presentation was from Harvard about a year ago. And it is called, Why Do People Defend the Gender Binary? It is from some non-binary professor at Purdue University. And we're going to see what they had to say. Let's get this party started. As a reminder, if anyone has questions at any point, please do feel free to ask them in the chat, especially for new people. If you are new here and you haven't watched this type of content before, please ask questions in the chat. And please remember, guys, don't assume that anything you've ever heard from the conservative right is true. Just take this from a beginner's mindset. Every single person that's watched my content for an extended period of time on this channel has had to return to a beginner's mindset where we acknowledge that we really know nothing and we've got to start learning all over again from scratch, because all the people that we trusted to inform us lied to us. That is why we only use primary source evidence. We only use what is actually going on in the real world. We don't use interpretation. We don't use pundits. We don't use commentators. We don't use use James Lindsay talking about a Gnostic fucking sex cult. We listen to the real far left in the real world, in their natural environment, and that is how we assess what they are doing. And if you have questions about it, if you don't understand the language, that's okay. It's no harm, no foul. It's okay to be a beginner at something. Please ask questions. We will answer them. We will help you along in this process. And the more questions you ask, the faster you're going to learn. And that's all I have to say. Let's get this party started, guys. Please make sure you have mounted the like button. Please make sure you have subscribed to the channel if you're not already. Let's see what happened at Harvard.
Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon if you're here in our time zone, or good evening. Know if we might even have some good mornings. We really appreciate your being here for this wonderful event. I'm Hannah Riley Bowles. I'm here in my capacity as co-director of the Women and Public Policy Program here at the Harvard Kennedy School. Before we get started, I also would like to recognize our colleague at the Women in Public Policy Program, Anisha Asundish, who is our Director of Research and Programs, for organizing our event today in collaboration with the LGBTQ plus Student Caucus and also the Harvard LGBTQ plus staff and faculty ERG. So we are grateful to all those who've created this opportunity for us today. Before we go any further, I'd like to offer a quick land acknowledgement. WAP and the Harvard Kennedy School are located on the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary unceded homeland of the Massachusetts people, the surviving descendants of the first people of Massachusetts and of the Neponset Band of the Massachusetts. We honor this tradition
Land
and work
blessing.
toward a gender equity agenda that addresses the needs of all women, including Indigenous women and Indigenous.
Pop quiz. What does a gender equity agenda mean? We haven't had a good, this is a good land blessing from Harvard. Harvard land blessing. What does a gender equity agenda mean? Harvard is working towards a gender equity agenda. What does that mean? In plain English, please. It means to abolish gender. Why does it mean to abolish gender? Why does gender equity mean to abolish gender? It does mean abolish the gender, abolish the patriarchy. Yup. It means no men and women. The gender binary is men and women. Why do you need to abolish gender in order to achieve gender equity? It's about abolishing the gender binary. Everyone is non-gendered. Yup. Because you can't have equity with men and women. Why? Because gender is a hierarchy with men on top, women on the bottom. That's what the patriarchy is. It's a hierarchy. Gender upholds capitalism. Well, capitalism created gender is what they believe. So you got to strike that, reverse it. It does uphold it in an indirect sense too, but capitalism came before gender because capitalism put men in the workplace where they had all the power and all the money. It put women in the home where they did the unpaid labor of raising the nuclear family. So they believe that capitalism created gender. Abolishing gender to get rid of men and women to make everyone the same. Yup, that's what abolishing the gender binary is. It does mean the no more nuclear family. It is an indirect attack on the nuclear family. Abolishing the hierarchies. Yup, gender, gender equity does mean abolishing the hierarchies between the genders. And what they believe is the only way that you can create gender equity means abolish the hierarchy. Equity means the sameness. Equity means we are all on the same level. They believe the only way we can achieve gender equity is to abolish the genders. To get rid of men, to get rid of women, and that way everyone's the same. No more gender, no more hierarchy. Gender roles create inequity, not inequality. The left does not care about equality. You've always got to replace equality with equity. Equity means Marxism. Equality means capitalism. Equality still exists under capitalism. So always remember, it's not equality, it's equity. No, capitalism created gender. Strike that, reverse it. Let's see. The nuclear family upholds capitalism, which is the system that creates the gender disparity. That's true. When you make everyone the same, there is no hierarchy. Exactly. Well done, guys.
Communities. Today's event is organized in recognition of International Transgender Day of Visibility, which took place this past week on March 31st
I feel
and
like
is
we've seen this
dedicated to
person
celebrating transgender people and to raising awareness of discrimination faced by transgender people worldwide.
Have we seen this person before? I feel like this person may have been on an early episode of Happy Hour or something.
We are honored today to have Professor Tekla Morgenroth presenting on why people defend the gender binary. This is a critically important question for the study of gender, for the politics of gender, and for people's lived experience. And she is they are a leading speaker, a leading thinker on this topic within the field of psychology and influencing many folks beyond that. Dr. Tekla Morgenroth is an assistant professor of social psychology at Purdue University. Their research examines why and how people maintain social categories and hierarchies with a particular focus on the gender-sex binary and its consequences for women and members of the LGBTQ+ community. Some of their current projects include research on opposition to policies and practices that challenge the gender-sex binary, the psychology of different feminist ideologies, the link between gender nonconformity and identity denial, and moral arguments made in the context of controlling women's bodies, for instance, in the context of sex work or abortion. Dr. Morgenroth serves as the principal investigator with the Unicorn Lab. And in this lab, they study how and why people defend and maintain social categories and hierarchies that of the—
What the fuck is the Unicorn Lab? Hey bot, can you look up the Unicorn Lab at Purdue University? I think it would be at Purdue, right? She works at Purdue. Well, them works at Purdue. What the fuck? Check this out. The Unicorn Lab studies how and why people defend and maintain social categories and hierarchies. They may as well call it the fucking Socialism Lab. Bot, go find me this Unicorn Lab, please. Bot's already found it. This is why Bot is the chief investigative officer for the cult. Holy shit. Guys, what the fuck? First of all, the website is designed in Wix. Magical projects, magical publications, become a unicorn. Why do I feel like we just tripped and fell down the rabbit hole of insanity? Hang on, I'm sorry. We need to just spend a minute on this. Sometimes for new people, sometimes when we are watching these crazy academic presentations, we stumble upon these rabbit holes where we go down into the depths of insanity and we find the craziest things you've ever seen on the internet. And I gotta say, when I'm seeing something about magical projects and magical publications and becoming a fucking unicorn, and this is all an academic project, I'm kind of like, huh. My research examines how and why people maintain social categories and hierarchies, especially when they are challenged, with a particular focus on the gender and sex binary and its consequences for women and members of the LGBTQ+ community. Some of my current projects include research on opposition to policies and practices that challenge the gender and sex binary, the psychology of different feminist ideologies, the link between gender nonconformity and identity denial, and moral arguments made in the context of regulating women's bodies. Okay. Pop quiz for the chat. Why are we paying attention to something that is explicitly about why people maintain social categories and hierarchies? Why is maintaining social categories and hierarchies, why isn't my highlighter working? Dang. I gotta refresh this browser. Why is maintaining social categories and hierarchies an important thing for us? Wow. Welcome to Unicorn, Understanding Identity and the Continuance of Roles and Norms Lab. Hierarchy is necessary for the function of capitalism. Yes, but capitalism creates all hierarchies. Socialists are against hierarchies. Hierarchies uphold capitalism. Communists want to destroy all hierarchies, regardless of what they are. True. You can't have socialism with hierarchies, because a hierarchy is oppressed. Oppressor versus oppressed. Bourgeois versus proletariat. Whiteness versus blackness. Man versus woman. Normative versus queer. Able-bodied versus disabled. Thin versus fat, if we're doing fat studies on a given day. These are all hierarchies that they believe capitalism has created. The goal of the left is to flatten all hierarchies. You cannot have socialism and have hierarchies. Socialism, equity, is a world without hierarchies. So what they're doing is they're identifying all the hierarchies that capitalism has created, and they're saying, how do we flatten those out to create our little Marxist utopia? Does everyone understand that? There is no equity if hierarchy exists. Yes, socialists don't like hierarchies because hierarchies function on ability. That's part of it, Kev. Hierarchy is the opposite of equity. Exactly. Magical projects. Magical publications. These are just all... Look at all these journal articles. Become a unicorn. If you are an undergraduate student at Purdue, you can apply to be a research assistant at the Unicorn Lab through a class. It's a class. Oh, it's a page not found on the website. I will not be able to accept new graduate students for fall. So maybe she's just not doing it right now. Well, okay, no, fall. We're in 2024. What am I talking about? Never mind. Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that. We should definitely look into that a little bit more, though, if I'm honest about it. We need to look into this person a little bit more. This person's doing something weird. I have a sixth sense about these things. This person's doing something weird.
Character that relate directly to their research I was just describing. In their paper on defending the gender-sex binary, their paper defending the gender-sex binary is featured in WAP's Gender Action Portal, and it is one of the top 10 most viewed articles on the website with over 12,000 views now. Our speaker, Dr. Morgenroth, will speak for about 40 minutes, and then they'll take questions for about 15 minutes or so from our audience. So we'll ask that you please hold your questions until the end of the talk. Anisha will lead the Q&A to facilitate that process. So please use the Q&A function on Zoom to get your question in. And we do ask that any audience questions be brief, that they be on topic, that they be posed in the form of a question and related to the presenter's presentation. Wonderful. Please join me in thanking Professor Morgenroth, and thank you all for attending.
They, them.
Thank you so much for this introduction, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited to share my work. I will start by sharing my screen. I also see that someone has raised their hand and I think said something in the Q&A, but I don't know what the question meant. So I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, great. Okay, I'm gonna now minimize this window where I see all of you so I can actually see my slides. So I won't see it if anyone raises their hand or tries to gesture to me. So if anything is going wrong, just feel free to interrupt me. All right, so today I'm gonna present some of my work of why people defend the gender binary. I will start off with some theoretical background and then present work from one of my recent empirical papers. I'm a social psychologist by training, so I usually present this work to other social psychologists or other psychologists at least. I will try to make this more accessible for a non-psychology audience, but if at any point anything is super unclear and you just need more detail or need me to define something, please feel free to just ask clarification questions. I'm happy to explain in more detail what I'm talking about. But anyway, so this is the big question. Why do people defend the gender binary? And I'm just going to start off by sort of what really made me interested in this topic. So across the last few years, we've really seen a shift, or across the last 10 years or so, in how gender is perceived. So for example, Germany has now a legalized third gender that they have to use in sort of all legal contexts.
Germany is an entire country with, what is it called when you sympathize with your kidnappers? What is that called when you sympathize with your kidnappers? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Where someone kidnaps you and they keep you captive for a long time. Stockholm Syndrome. Thank you, average person. Average person in for the win. Yeah, Germany is an entire country with decades of Stockholm Syndrome.
And we also have seen a growing visibility of and support for transgender people. And all of that is amazing. But at the same time, there's this very strong and very vocal opposition that we see to these changes. So for example, we can see that reflected in these recent drag show bans, even though that is not necessarily aimed at transgender people, it has implications for transgender people. And what I find particularly interesting is that these anti-trans sentiments and the support for these anti-trans bills really comes from a range of different groups that you wouldn't necessarily think have a lot in common with each other, such as some conservative groups and some feminist groups who seem united in this anti-trans sentiment.
No, the feminists and the conservatives hate each other.
And I've presented this slide. So this is already, these numbers are already outdated. I presented that like maybe 2 weeks ago. And what we see here is the number of proposed anti-trans bills in the US across the years. I made the very first version of a similar presentation in 2018, where the number of bills was under 50. It's now only the beginning of April in 2023, and we're already at around 450 just for this year. So there has been this really large surge of anti-trans bills that have been proposed and also that are passing. Of course, not all of these pass, but a good chunk of them does. And this is kind of what that looks like across the United States. The light blue states and dark blue states are the ones where trans rights are protected and there's a low risk of that changing. And the red states are the ones that have the worst active anti-trans laws or where there is a high risk of it changing. I'm currently in Indiana, that's where I live. And there you can see that's a pretty dark red state. And there's also an imminent potential to raise the risk category. So that's kind of what the United States looks like. So at the moment, it's a very polarizing
it's made by Aaron
issue,
Reed, who's a
and
trans
there's
activist.
An increase in these anti-trans bills that take all kinds of forms. So that can be related to trans-affirming healthcare, banning trans athletes from competing in sports, kind of having these sex-segregated spaces by sex rather than by gender identity, preventing schools from covering LGBTQ topics, including trans topics, and maybe the most extreme ones are even ones that would give employers, businesses, and even hospitals the ability to discriminate against or deny service to transgender people. And so why is this happening? I'm interested in what is driving this opposition. You would think that, especially among, I'm particularly interested in why feminists do have this these opposing.
It is a bizarre thing to me that anyone, especially people who want to transition their gender, would want to go to a doctor or a hospital that doesn't want to serve them. Do you actually think you're going to get good care if a person doesn't want to serve you? It's like the whole wedding cake argument. It's like, yeah, I mean, okay, can you force a bakery to bake a fucking wedding cake for you? I guess you can, but is that a wedding cake that you want? Do you think that wedding cake's going to be good? Because I'm going to be honest, man, if I was that baker, if I was the baker, in a bakery that I got forced into baking a gay wedding cake that I didn't want to make, that cake ain't going to come out good. I'll bake you a fucking cake. It's not going to poison you or anything. But it's not going to be good. I'm going to leave that cake out, on the fridge for a while. The cake's going to be good and stale. It's not going to be moist. It's not going to have any flavor. It might, I'm going to do the bare minimum of fucking decoration. If you try to make me do something, and a court says I have to, sure, you'll get a cake. You'll get a cake. Ain't going to be a cake you want. Ain't going to be a cake that anyone likes. Not going to poison you or anything, but there are a lot of ways you can sabotage a project.
But I'm also more generally interested in what is driving this opposition. And in my work, I focus on the power of the regulatory power of the gender-sex binary and the role that that plays. So what do I mean by the gender-sex binary? The gender-sex binary is this ideological system that is widespread in modern Western societies. And according to this ideology, biological sex is binary and dictates binary gender. So there's kind of two groups of people according to this framework. One group has XX chromosomes, will develop typically female bodies, for example, with ovaries, a vagina, breasts, and the ability to carry children, have high levels of estrogen, and so on. And that group of people will identify as a woman and will also act in line with the feminine gender role, meaning that they'll be warm and caring, attracted to men, interested in romance novels, all the sort of stereotypes that are associated with women. And then there's the second group of people, and that group has XY chromosomes, will develop typically male bodies and will identify as men and will act in line with the masculine gender, also be assertive and strong, attracted to women, interested in weightlifting and boxing and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the idea of the gender binary. Of course, we know this isn't actually an accurate reflection of gender. So there's people who have XX chromosomes but do not develop typically female bodies. So that might mean that they might not develop the sort of secondary sex characteristics associated with that, or they might just not have the ability to carry children and so on. And we also know that there's people with XX chromosomes who do develop typically female bodies, but who do not identify as women, but might identify as men or as non-binary people, or a range of other identities. And of course, we also know that there's many people who have XX chromosomes, develop typically female bodies, identify as women, but do not act in line with the feminine gender role because they might not be particularly warm or caring, they might not be attracted to men, and instead they might be, for example, very assertive, very ambitious, or be in male-dominated fields. And of course, the same is true for people with XY chromosomes. So this is just not an accurate representation of what gender is like. And so that kind of begs the question of, okay, but like, if this isn't an accurate representation of gender or sex or the sort of relationship between sex and gender, then why do we believe this? Like, what is happening here? And my research tries to sort of answer that question, at least to some extent. And so I'm drawing here on work from outside of psychology. So part of my work is based on Goffman and sort of this idea that gender is a social performance, a form of impression management. And I take from that the metaphor of a theater and of performance, of how we kind of do gender.
Where have we seen that? Gender is a social performance. It's what did she call it? It's identity management. Gender is a performance, just like you would perform in a theater. Where have we heard that before? There was a video on queer kid stuff where LGBT was written on the chalkboard. Well, of course it was. Yup, the Penguin song. Yup, Judith Butler. Drag Queen Story Hour. The whole point of Drag Queen Story Hour, for people who are new, Drag Queen Story Hour is not about sexualizing kids, no matter how many people says it is. That's not what it's about. Drag Queen Story Hour is about teaching children that gender is a performance. Why do we want to teach children that gender is a performance? Because if children believe that you can change your gender as easily as changing an outfit, and you teach them this really young, they're going to have this idea in their head that the gender binary is not real, that gender is not real, that you're not man or woman, you're on some sort of spectrum of gender. You might feel like a boy one day, a girl the next day. You might feel like you're a non-binary fucking unicorn the day after that. If they learn this when they're young enough, that cements in their head, because we have these things called mirror neurons when we're little kids, that like everything that's taught to us, we suck it in like a sponge. This is why you always want to teach kids languages as early as you possibly can, because kids are going to learn languages much faster if you teach it to them early. But the same is true for, the same is true for gender and all this crazy shit. If you teach them that gender and all this crazy shit is like not real really early on, it cements in their brain, and then they believe it forever. Then you've got a whole generation of kids, which we're dealing with now in the colleges, who grow up believing gender is a performance. And if they believe that gender is a performance, that is how they are abolishing the gender binary. Abolishing the gender binary is not going to be about some law that's handed down to say there are no men and there are no women. How they are abolishing the gender binary is by teaching it to kids when they're really young. This is the slow game. This is the long game. They don't think in months, they don't think in years, they think in decades. If we start teaching this to kids when they're young, they're going to grow up and they're not going to believe gender exists. It is a passive abolition of the gender binary. Does everyone understand that? This is how you end up with babies. Yep, true.
In everyday life. And I also draw a lot on Butler and their work on gender performativity. So gender performativity goes a step further than performance. So it's not just you perform gender, but you create gender through the performance. So the idea here is that gender is created through its performance, and without this performance, gender wouldn't even be a thing. When I talk to my students about this, I often give the example of other characteristics that are real, but like we give them power through the social world and make them, we don't give them power and don't make them a thing. So for example, there's typically two types of people in the world. Some people have earlobes that are attached to their head, and some people have non-attached earlobes. You probably have never thought about this very much because it's not something that we give meaning. But of course, if we've suddenly started acting differently.
I have, because I have stretched earlobes, okay? So I have thought about this.
Because we are told, oh, you're a
guys
person
just
with
can't
attached
see them because I'm
earlobes, you
wearing
should behave this
headphones.
way. Or we divided kids into groups with attached and non-attached earlobes. We gave them different spaces, different places to play, different toys to play with. We told them, this is not the thing that you should do as a person with attached earlobes, and so on. Discouraged them from playing with people who have different earlobes. Told them that they should probably marry someone with different earlobes later on. Then that would become a thing. We would like perform that role, and that would suddenly create a meaningful social category. Right now, it's not, but we do that with gender. So the idea here is not that like sex and
I'll post a picture on Twitter with my earlobes so you can see them. I actually do have a picture.
Gender don't exist or aren't important, but just that we create that through our own performance and through the kind of social repercussions that we face if we don't perform gender right. But Butler's work goes beyond that. So their work is also a call to action to disrupt the gender binary by causing gender trouble. And that's a term I will also sometimes use throughout this presentation. I'll explain in more detail what exactly I mean by that. And so based on this, we've created, and on a lot of psychological work and psychological theory, we've created this framework that we call the inner workings of the gender-sex binary, in which we kind of draw on this metaphor to explain how gender is performed and how that then gives this impression of these two binary categories that I explained in the beginning. So the idea here is that the performance of gender happens through three different elements. So there's the character in this binary framework, that is the character of a woman or a man. Of course, there can be many other characters, but that's kind of how it's set up in this framework. And that can both mean who do you identify as? And I'm not saying character or like this performance metaphor does not imply that that isn't based on a sort of meaningful inner sense of self. So you can really have a very meaningful inner sense of self, of being a woman, of being a man, of being non-binary. And also this character refers to what you think someone else is when you see them and categorize them in one way or the other. And the character is performed through the costume and the script. So the costume is the gendered appearance and gender presentation. When we talk about this, we mean here both the body and the presentation of the body. You might think that those are really different things, but I'm finding it very hard to make a distinction between those two because our presentation of the body is so inherently gendered and also so inherently ingrained. So like, for example, if you think about body hair, that is something that men are encouraged to keep and women are encouraged to get rid of. And of course, you could also think about the fact that if no one shaved their body hair, then yes, people who identify as and are identified as women on average have less body hair than men do. But that is of course exacerbated through this socialization processes and through this pressure on women to shave off their body hair. And it's almost impossible to have a neutral body. There is no neutral body. Like women have to make a decision to either comply with this norm or not comply with this norm. But either way, they make a decision about the presentation of their body. There's no neutral or natural body that is kind of seen without this cultural lens. And so that's why we mean talk about both the body and the presentation of the body when we talk about the costume. The script is kind of all these gendered behaviors that we do, the movies we like, the hobbies we have, how we talk, the occupations we go into, all those kinds of things are the script. And in this binary framework, those three things are usually aligned. So someone who identifies as a woman will present as a woman and act in line with the script. So she will also act femininely and dress femininely. So this can be, so the costume and the script can really be used both to communicate something about your inner sense of self. So if you identify as a man, then you can use the costume and the script to communicate that to other people. And other people can use that to infer something about you. So if you see someone who maybe wears a dress and high heels and has long hair and wears makeup and wears jewelry, then you might assume that this person is a woman, given that you didn't necessarily have time to ask that person, but that's kind of how it works. Now, I'm a social psychologist, so I don't really think that these things take place in the vacuum. I know that this takes place in a social and cultural context. That's what we call the stage in our work. So that is kind of the physical and cultural context in which gender is performed. And in our society, it is set up to kind of highlight binary performance and obfuscate non-binary performance or anything that isn't in line with that. So if you think, for example, about physical spaces, when you go to the bathroom in any sort of public building, often you have to choose between a women's bathroom and the men's.
No, it's not the same thing. I think that's more feminism than it is anything else. These people never talk about the gender pay gap. Like the only way that these people talk about the gender pay gap is they talk about women doing the unpaid labor of like raising the family, but that's pretty much it.
Bathroom, so there's only two options. This also includes laws. So, for example, which genders are legally, what are you allowed to have on your driving license, on your birth certificate, in your passport.
Listen, I like having I like stretch lobes. I like them. I've never, like, people are always like, you're gonna regret it. Your ear's gonna look like a cat's, but I've like never taken them out. I probably should have gone bigger. Like the only reason I didn't actually go bigger was because I was like the tiniest bit afraid, and like 0 is kind of like as big as you can get before you start before it actually like you actually can't go back. And so I was like the tiniest bit afraid when I was younger. I was like, maybe I am gonna want to take these out at some point, and I just never wanted to take them out. I never wanted to take them out. And now I kind of wish I had gone bigger. Maybe I still should. I suppose I still could if I wanted to. Not that motivated though.
Like whether there was only two options or multiple options. And it also includes things such as language. So for example, if you speak in if you say ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, he or she, all of those things are things that sort of imply that there are two and only two genders. And so this is how kind of the gender binary is reinforced by people doing that, and by specific things happening when this doesn't happen. So usually character, costume, and script are aligned. And when they're not aligned, then that is kind of what we call gender trouble. Then something isn't quite right. And people have different ways that they can react to that. They can, for example, just realign the other things. So if someone is presenting in a very feminine way and acting in a very feminine way, but saying, I identify as a man, they might deny that identity and just process that person as a woman. Or they might like actively try to dissuade the person from acting that way. And for example, like backlash against women in leadership, sort of violence against trans people, violence against other LGBTQ people, those can all be seen as sort of a form to like force people to realign character, costume, and script. And what happens so these are the different forms of gender trouble that we look at in our work. So there's performance-based gender trouble. So for example, playing a different character, putting on a different costume, or deviating from the script. So those are all things that individual people can do through their performance. But what I'm actually particularly interested in is context-based gender trouble. So like kind of disrupting the stage and how we set up the stage to kind of highlight or
multi-gendering,
disrupt this framework. And here I mostly in my work focus on two different forms of context-based gender trouble. One is degendering and one is multi-gendering. Degendering refers to any policies or practices that kind of get rid of gender and try to get rid of the salience of gender in our like society. So for example, an example in the legal space would be to get rid of gender on passports. In language, it would be replacing things such as he or she with just the neutral they. Or in space, it would be just having unisex spaces that aren't gendered and aren't kind of where gender isn't even mentioned. Multi-gendering, on the other
So you
hand,
see that.
refers to
So you see that. No. Like, bro, no. They're literally not making this up at all. If they were making it up, they would be completely inconsistent across presentations because they're just making it up. They're not making it up at all. Where like, and if you think that they're making it up, you need to go back to the start of the presentation and listen again. The goal of this presentation is to abolish the gender binary. That is what they're doing. And by the way, if you have questions, you can ask questions, but don't come in my chat and make assertions like this, bro. Their goal is explicit. It is consistent. They say the same thing every time. We've been watching this shit for years. Their goal is to abolish the gender binary. The gender binary means men and women. Why do they want to abolish the gender binary? Because they believe capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership, created the gender binary, which put men in the workplace, women in the home, men in the workplace where they had all the power and all the money, women in the home where they did the unpaid labor of raising the next generation of proletarian workers in the nuclear family. This is also called the patriarchy. This is a gender hierarchy. This is what creates gender inequity. The only way they get gender equity is by abolishing gender, because when they abolish the gender, they flatten the hierarchy. If you get rid of gender, there is no more gender hierarchy. All of what she is saying is completely 100% consistent with what I just described. So they're not making it up at all. And this is why people need to learn this stuff, and this is why people need to watch this stuff. Because if you believe they are making this up, you do not understand the left. If you believe that all of this is just poof, coming out of nowhere, you do not understand the left. So what she just said is, what they them just said is that they are trying to abolish all gendered language. We already talked earlier about how they teach kids that gender is a spectrum, that gender is queer, gender is fluid by Drag Queen Story Hour. If you teach, okay, so you are a retard then. So are you a retard? Actually, I'm going to wait. This is a yes or no question. Are you retarded? If you don't answer yes or no, you're going to get banned in my chat. You're playing my fucking game now. Are you retarded? If you answer no, you're not retarded, then I'm going to ask you what was confusing about the explanation that I just gave you. If you don't have an answer for what was confusing about it, I'm going to ban you from my chat because you're not smart enough to be here. If you answer yes, that you are retarded, then I'm going to ban you from my chat because you're not smart enough to be here. So which is it? Are you retarded, yes or no? Because I have an IQ requirement to be on my channel. I'm very serious about this IQ requirement. If you are not smart enough to be here, then I'm just going to ban you, because all you're going to do is cause problems, and you're going to whine and complain, and you're not going to listen, and you're not going to learn anything. I cannot help stupid people, bro. Carolyn is triggered. Okay, so we're going to take that as a yes. You are retarded, and now you're permanently banned. Goodbye. That's how we do it on the channel, folks. That's how we do it on the channel. So we already discussed how Drag Queen Story Hour is to teach kids that gender is a spectrum. The reason you want to teach kids that gender is a spectrum is if kids grow up believing that gender is non-binary, they believe that gender doesn't really exist, that is a natural way to abolish the gender binary. Because if you create an entire generation of kids that don't know, that truly believe, because they've been taught it from the time they were 5 years old, that gender doesn't exist, that's just a natural way of abolishing the gender binary. But there are other things they're doing too. What them just said is they want to ban all gendered terms. So if you're getting rid of all gendered terms in society, then society, as a result of that, is just going to naturally become non-binary. Yes. Exactly. These are the people behind attacks on gendered language. These are the people who don't want Walt Disney to say, or Disney World to say, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. These are the people who, I mean, we've watched a million taxpayer-funded trainings where they're like, don't say mom and dad, don't say brother or sister. Don't say boys or girls. Don't say ladies and gentlemen. It's the same idea. If you abolish the language, if you literally, it's like in 1984, if you take the language away from people, people are not going to have the words to vocalize the ideas. When we don't have the words to vocalize the ideas go away. Does that make sense? You're missing the point here. The point here is not to express your opinion. The point here is not to dunk on the libs. The point here is not to debunk what they're saying. The goal of this is to understand their perspective. None of this matters. This does not matter. What you're trying to do is debunk them. Debunking them is never going to solve the problem. If debunking them was going to solve the problem, it already would have solved it already. What your goal here is to learn. Your goal here is not to debunk. Every single time you guys debunk them, and by the way, if you think that we haven't heard stuff like this before, if you think you're just coming to the channel and delivering new information that we haven't heard before, we've heard everything a million times. We're not interested in your debunking. We are interested in you learning what their perspective is so that you can go and teach other people what their perspective is. Your opinion on the topic does not matter. My opinion on the topic does not matter. No one's in the chat's opinions on the topic matters at all. This is only and exclusively about learning what they believe and learning how to explain it to other people. If debunking them worked, we wouldn't be here. If debunking them worked, they wouldn't be winning. So again, if you guys have questions, if anyone has questions about what they're saying because you want to understand it, questions are acceptable. Debunking is not allowed in my chat.
Policies and practices that highlight the non-binary nature of gender. So that would include, for example, saying he, she, or they, having a third gender option or a fourth or fifth on legal documents, or having multiple spaces for people who have other identities other than male and female. And in some of my past work, I've looked at people's reactions to that. It seems that generally degendering is less popular than multi-gendering, I think, because it still affords some of these psychological benefits that these categories we have gives us. But if any of these things happen, any form of gender trouble, I argue, can lead to different forms of threat and in turn to efforts to reinforce the gender-sex binary. And that's kind of why people have these reactions that I talked about in the very beginning, these like sort of strong reactions to
Do you know why we don't debunk them? This entire presentation is about how to get around your debunking. Literally, they've done an entire psychological study on how to get around your debunking. They don't care about your debunking. They're trying to study you to figure out how to go around you. Does everyone understand this?
Trans people to use of gender changing more generally. And I here distinguish between three different forms of threats. So personal threat, group and identity-based threat, and system threat. So personal threat is anything that kind of affects people personally. So for example, a man's status. So lots of men have more status, and that is partially afforded to them through the gender binary, and which is also a patriarchal system. And so when you change that system and disrupt
The gender binary is a patriarchal system. You guys just hear that? That's because gender binary and the patriarchy mean the same thing.
men have more status, and that is partially afforded to them through the gender binary, and which is also a patriarchal system. And so when you change that system and disrupt that system, that might threaten a specific person's status as a man, or like the sort of power that this man has in society. So that would be a form of personal threat. Group and identity-based threats are ones that affect sort of the groups that you belong to and the identities that are sort of associated with that. So for a lot of people, gender identity is a very important part of how they see themselves. And so it kind of tells them who they are and who they're not and where they belong, and gives them solidarity and all those sort of good things that groups can do. But of course, then if you like mess with those groups and those group boundaries, that can be really threatening and also lead to efforts to reinforce the gender-sex binary. And lastly, system threat, that's kind of based on system justification theory, which is a theory that explains why people support systems even when they do not benefit them. So systems are just nice, like humans are We need heuristics. This is a complex world. We need to
Guys, socialists believe that capitalism doesn't benefit anyone. They believe that that most people really should oppose capitalism because most people are oppressed under capitalism. So part of the reason they're studying this is she just said it, or they them just said it. It's like there are a lot of people in the world who support systems that don't really benefit them. Why do they do that? They believe capitalism is one of those systems.
kind of reduce the uncertainty and the complexity of the world, and systems do that, and gender is a nice system that does that. And so disruptions to the gender sex binary also cause system threat. And all of these things can then lead to efforts to reinforce the gender sex binary, including some of these anti-trans laws. And that's what I want to focus on next, and specifically a form of personal threat in this context. And so the threat that I want to talk about here is the threat to women's safety that is often mentioned in the context of trans-inclusive policies, particularly policies that allow trans women access to women-only spaces. This is a project with my collaborators here on the right, Jordan Axe and Erin Westgate. And I want to start off with a quote from J.K. Rowling that I often use in these contexts because it really illustrates the arguments that are being made in this context. So what she says here is, "I want trans women to be safe. But at the same time, I do not want to make natal girls and women less safe. When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, then you open the doors to any and all men who wish to come inside. That is the simple truth." So the argument here is that I support trans women. This has nothing to do with trans women. I'm not bothered by trans women at all, but I think cisgender men might abuse policies that allow trans women to come into these spaces and gain access to vulnerable women. And so this is one of the most common arguments in debates about trans rights. And of course, it seems reasonable on the surface. Of course, women have a right to be safe from gender-based violence. We know that men are the primary perpetrators of harassment and sexual violence, for example, and we know that women are the primary targets. Of course, women should have safe spaces. But I'm not so convinced that this is actually what is driving people's opposition. One, because these arguments often also come from people who in other situations care very little about women's safety. And also because it just doesn't really make sense. Because if you really wanted things to be based on your sex assigned at birth, that would mean that transgender men whose sex assigned at birth was female would have to use the women's bathrooms. They often look completely indistinguishable from cisgender men. So in a sense, this would make it much easier for cisgender men to access these spaces. They could just claim to be transgender men. So this doesn't even achieve the thing that it's saying it's achieving. So I'm not convinced that this is really what is driving it. So the research question we were investigating here was, do opponents of trans-inclusive policies accurately report the underlying reasons for their opposition? Or are they just using these concerns about male violence as a convenient subterfuge?
Okay, well, Fluffy Cow Respecter has a question. Does the bourgeoisie benefit from capitalism? We'll do this as a pop quiz for the chat. Let's help Fluffy Cow Respecter understand. Does the bourgeoisie benefit from capitalism? Yes. How? How does the bourgeoisie benefit from capitalism? They uphold it, yup. But even more than that, the bourgeoisie is capitalism. That's exactly right. The bourgeois are the private property owners. The bourgeois are the landlords. They're the ones that own the big houses. They're the business owners. They're the industry leaders. The bourgeois are the oppressors. The bourgeois are always at the top of the hierarchy. It is the bourgeois, the private property owners, versus the proletariat, the non-private property owners, the people who rent their homes, the people who work for the businesses. At the moment, capitalism, which isn't an ideal system and certainly could use some improvement, but I'm not in favor of abolishing all private property, so at the moment it's going to have to do because it's the only thing that we have. By the way, guys, when the left says they want to abolish capitalism, they're not talking about getting rid of crony capitalism. They're not talking about getting rid of corrupt capitalism. They are only talking about getting rid of private property ownership. Private property means your ability to own a home, your ability to own land, your ability to own an apartment rental that you rent out as a landlord, your ability to own intellectual property, your ability to own a private business, whether that private business is big or small. Your parental rights are considered to be a form of private property under capitalism. Your individual liberties are considered to be a form of private property. That's what they're talking about getting rid of. The only alternative that we really have right now is maintaining private property ownership, which is some form of capitalism. And so capitalism might not be perfect. There might be problems. We should work on fixing those problems. But it is significantly better. No one said that. You have a problem with listening, and your problem with listening is eventually going to get you banned from this channel. Literally, no one said hypercapitalism. Stop making shit up. The alternative to communism is not fucking communism. That's what the alternative is. But you're going to stop making shit up on my channel. In fact, I'm going to start putting you in a timeout. Every single time from now on that you make something up, you're going to get put in a timeout. If I get sick of putting you in timeouts, I'm just going to ban you. You're not going to be able to talk anymore. We do not make shit up on this channel. Oh, you want to make fun of it? Okay, time out. Go sit it out.
To oppose these policies without seeming prejudiced. Because of course we know that no one wants to seem prejudiced. We live in a society that doesn't really tolerate prejudice, at least openly, at least in most of the society. So we ran a bunch of different studies. I'm going to present 4 of the correlational studies in meta-analytic form, meaning we combine them all together and kind of analyze them as one big data set rather than as individual studies. The results are pretty consistent across the different studies. Then we also ran 2 experimental studies to kind of make stronger causal claims about these mechanisms. And I'm going to start off with the correlational studies here. So across these studies altogether, we had almost 1,900 participants. They were recruited online, and they were all cisgender women.
This is exactly right. When I said capitalism means private property ownership, what I meant is capitalism means private property ownership. That's not how I define it. That's how they define it. They're in control. They own all the institutions. They control the dictionary. They're winning. They get to define the term. It is our job to understand their definition. Thus, some moron, because he doesn't want to fucking listen, coming into the chat going, you mean hyper-capitalism then? No. No, I don't. Because there ain't no such thing as hyper-private property ownership. People might think I deal too harshly with people on my channel, but when you just come in and make shit up, that is a habit that you need to break. No one can break you of that habit but you. Stop making shit up, hinge into reality, deal with what's right in front of you.
And men from the US and the UK. And we kind of described to them these types of policies that would give transgender women access to women-only spaces, and just asked them to self-categorize as opponents or supporters. So we asked them, in general, would you say you oppose these policies, or in general, do you support these kinds of policies? And then we also measured their support or opposition, so their policy views on a scale, so that we gave them different statements, and then they indicated their support on a scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree on a scale from 1 to 7. And we had different items. They were slightly different across different studies, but here's an example from one of the studies. So some of the items were, for example, women's shelter should be accessible to anyone who identifies as a woman, or transgender people should be able to use the bathroom of the gender they most closely identify with, regardless of whether they've had have received hormone replacement therapy or gender confirmation surgery. So people just indicated how much they agreed with that, and that we averaged that out across the different items, and that is our measure of policy views. And then we just, after they did that, we just asked them why. Like we asked them, we're interested in the reasons why you feel that way. And we asked about 2 reasons in particular. So their feelings towards transgender people and their thoughts around violence committed by men. We again asked this slightly differently across the different studies, but generally we were just like, okay, to what extent extent do your attitudes towards trans people and your sort of fear of male violence, your concern for women's safety, again, slightly different across different studies, to what extent do those affect your views on this? And in addition, we then also just measured their attitudes towards trans people and their views on male violence. Again, we measured this slightly differently across different studies. Here's an example from one study, or like we used this measure across multiple studies, but not in all studies. So we asked them, for example, to indicate on a scale from -3 to +3, where -3 stood, I strongly prefer trans people to cis people, and +3 would be I strongly prefer cisgender people to transgender people. So that then gives you a measure of bias, how much they like one group more than the other. In one of the studies, we also only asked about trans people just to make sure that this wasn't just about them really liking cis people. So we only asked about trans people, and one of the studies replicated beautifully. And then we also had this gender violence association. So in one of the studies we had, I strongly associate women with peace and men with violence, to I strongly associate women with violence and men with peace. In one of the other studies, we were like, okay, this is like a little removed from the
Fluffy cow respecter, you got it right. Don't worry about it.
arguments that people are actually making. So we also had some other measures where people indicated their agreement with statements such as some men will always look
Fluffy cow respecter like just thought he was voting in favor of trans people, and then he got confused.
for a loophole to gain access to vulnerable women, or it's really like women's safety is really important to me. So we measured this slightly differently across different studies. Okay, but what did we find? So this is just what people say, why they have the views that they have. So the yellow bars are their attitudes towards trans people, and the red bars are their male violence concerns. And this is across the different studies. And you can see here that for supporters who are on the right, the yellow bar is higher than the red bar. So they say their views, policy views, so their support for trans inclusive policies is primarily driven by their attitudes towards trans people, more so than their male violence concerns. And for opponents, we see the opposite. So they say that male violence concerns are more important for informing their sort of views on trans inclusive policies than their attitudes towards trans people. So this is a nice kind of reflection of that quote that I showed you in the beginning by J.K. Rowling, where she's saying, like, this isn't about trans people. I support trans people. This is really the true reason why I oppose these policies is because I'm concerned about male violence. Okay, so if this was actually the truth, then we should also find similar patterns in the correlations when we look at how are these things associated with each other, but we don't. Well, for supporters, we do. So when we look at supporters first, you can see that, so these are the correlations between their attitudes and their gender violence association, respectively, and their support for trans inclusive policies. So for supporters, you can see that their attitudes towards trans people is associated with negatively associated with support for trans inclusive policies, such that if they have more negative attitudes, they're less supportive of these policies. Makes sense. So that's a correlation of minus 0.26. Their gender violence association is also associated with support for trans inclusive policies, but in the opposite direction, such that if they view men as more violent, they're more supportive of these policies. But if you just compare the size of these two correlations, the 0.26 is significantly stronger than the 0.13, meaning that what they're saying is driving their support is also more strongly driving their support. So trans attitudes are more strongly related to their views than gender violence association is. For opponents, we find a similar pattern in the strength of the correlations, but this is not what they said, right? So they said the gender violence association is actually the primary driver of their policy views, but that does not seem to be the case here. That 0.33 there is significantly stronger than that 0.15 below. So for them also, trans attitudes are the main driver of their opposition or of their lack of support, but that is not reflecting on what they said in their answers when we directly asked them. So in other words, for supporters of trans inclusive policies, the reasons they give match the pattern in the data, but for opponents, they do not. But these correlational studies have limitations. So this is all correlational. We don't really have causal evidence that one thing is causing the other thing. We just know they are associated with each other. And also this reason measure is on an individual level, but the prediction is on the group level. So that's just kind of like, it could be that for individual people, their individual reasons that they're given are actually true. So we wanted some experimental evidence where we just like kind of push around trans attitudes and push around their sort of beliefs about male violence and see if that would affect their support for trans inclusive policies. So if it's really just about their attitudes trans people, then pushing that around should affect trans their policy views. But if it is like they
This is the
said,
most
if it
boring
is
part. We just
actually
got to
about
get through
male
it. Everyone
violence
hang in
concerns,
there.
then pushing that around should have a stronger effect because that should really be the thing that is driving their views. Of course, it's also hard to do. It's really hard to manipulate attitudes. It's really hard to manipulate stereotypes. People have pretty consistent and like, just consistent attitudes and consistent stereotypes. This is not something that is easily changed, unfortunately. And it's even harder to manipulate both in a parallel fashion and with equal strength, so that we can make strong claims. But we tried anyway, and I'm going to show you the results of that now. So we had 2 experimental studies, and these studies, all participants were opponents of trans inclusive policies. So we were no longer really interested in understanding the supporters. I feel like we've done that across the correlation.
Remember, guys, we're going to get to Q&A here in a minute. Like, sometimes we just got to sit through some boring shit to get to the good shit. And every once in a while, they say some really interesting things while they're in the boring section. This is just part of the game. This is the game we're playing. So I apologize if this is boring. I know this is boring. Everyone hang in there. Go get a drink or take a bathroom break or a snack or get a snack or something like that if you feel bored. And we're just going to keep going, though.
Studies, their patterns match what they're saying. They're not very interesting. I mean, they're great, but not very interesting. In this specific research question. So in the first experimental study, we had about 700 US American cisgender opponents to trans inclusive policies. We recruited them online. And then we had this between participants design based on an imagined
Kevin is
contact
high
paradigm.
today.
So in psychology, imagined contact is a form of prejudice reduction. So people then, like the way that this works is people imagine having a positive interaction with a member of a stigmatized group. And that has been shown to improve attitudes towards that group. It's kind of based on intergroup contact literature that shows that having positive contact with people from a stigmatized group does improve attitudes towards them. And this is kind of just making that all imagined, and that also has an effect, a weaker effect, but still has an effect. And so people were assigned randomly to 1 out of 3 conditions. So they either, one group just imagined.
Okay, well, it's now Kevin's job. Kevin, then you're going to, if you like this part, Kevin, you're going to have an assignment. You need to tell us what we need to know about this then, bro. This is, you're a doctor now. No more slacking off. And like, you guys remember that day that Kevin came on the channel and he ate way too many edibles? I still remember that. Kevin thinks I forgot about it. I did not forget about that. Back in the day when Kevin was still in school, he used to eat edibles and then come on my channel and he was all paranoid. So now it's your job, Kevin. You're official doctor now. You're not high. Explain to us what we need to know.
Imagine being at a party and wrote about that for 5 minutes. In the transgender condition, they imagined having a positive interaction with a transgender woman at a party. And then we try to adapt that to also change stereotypes around in this male violence or male peaceful man condition, where they imagined meeting a kind and gentle man at that party. So kind of a man who doesn't sort of fit these stereotypes of being aggressive or violent, which is a stereotype of men. And then we had the same measure of policy views as in the previous studies, where they indicated their agreement with these statements, such as trans women should have access to women's support groups and stuff like that. So this is kind of what they saw. So they saw this text, a good friend of yours is celebrating their birthday at a restaurant, has invited you. It's a big group of people, some of whom you know and some of whom you have never met before. And then everyone saw that. And then seated across from you is a woman you have never met, but who introduces herself as Emily. She's a good friend of the person who invited you. So that was only in a trans condition. And then it goes on to say Emily's a transgender woman. She was born biologically male and raised as a boy, but identifies as a woman. She came out as transgender during her teenage years and has been living as a woman for many years now. Emily seems like a nice and pleasant person. And then they're instructed to take 5 minutes to write about that interaction as a positive interaction. And so what did we find? So first we measured again this attitudes towards trans people, and these bars look very similar to each other, but there is in fact a significant effect. It's not very large, but it is there. such that the positive trans conditions, if they imagined having this positive interaction with this woman, they did have less bias towards trans people than in the control condition, but the peaceful man condition did exactly the same. So both of those lowered bias towards trans people. Not really sure why the peaceful man condition did that. Still don't know, but that's what happened. But there was absolutely no effect on this gender violence association, so on the views of male violence. We did not manage to push that around successfully in this study. And then if we just look at policy support, we find the pattern that we expected. So when people had this, imagined having this positive interaction with this trans woman, that bar in the middle, they were slightly more supportive of these trans inclusive policies than people in the other two conditions. So who either imagined just being at that party or who imagined interacting with this peaceful man.
Did she say anything about the sample, like the demographics of the sample for this? Did I miss that? Because I was bored.
And then if you throw all of this into this this mediation model, I'm not going to talk you through that in much detail. I just wanted to briefly show it to you that here, if you kind of look at this pathway through trans attitudes, you can see that that is significant. So when you push around trans attitudes, that also changes policy views. But this path through gender violence association is not significant. And in fact, if you just compare that last step of the of that model here, you see that trans attitudes and that is predicting policy views at a value of 0.75, minus 0.75. Gender violence association only 0.16. So that again is a much weaker link between these two constructs. So what we found in this specific study was that pushing around trans attitudes leads to changes in policy support, but we can't really make any claims about male violence beliefs. So if we just had that study, people could still say like, oh yeah, you pushed that around, but if you had pushed around those male violence beliefs, the effect would have been so much stronger. So actually what opponents say could be the truth, because you're just not, you can't like make any claims about that at that point. And maybe this isn't surprising that we didn't manage to push around these male violence beliefs, because the imagined contact paradigm is really used to change attitudes, not stereotypes. So not kind of the attributes we associate with different groups. So now we adapted a paradigm that has been used to change stereotypes, which is this imagined future paradigm, where people are told in the future, these groups will be in different roles, and these roles are generally associated with different stereotypes. And then you also think that those groups that are in those roles will have those stereotypes. So for example, in the past, it has been shown that if you say in the future, way more women are going to be in leadership positions, and then you ask them, what do you think women will be like in that future? People also think that those women will be more assertive, more decisive, blah, 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 all these things that you associate with leadership positions. So we adapted that kind of paradigm. We had this 2x2 design, so people either were assigned to read about a future in which trans people were overrepresented in positive roles, the roles that people generally have positive attitudes towards, or were overrepresented in roles that generally people have negative attitudes towards. And then we paired that with another condition where men were either overrepresented in peaceful occupations or in violent occupations, and women were overrepresented in the other one. And I'm going to show you what this looks like on the next slide. But again, we had over 700 US American opponents of trans inclusive policies. This again was conducted online. We had the same measures as before, but this time we adapted it to apply to this future society that people read about. So this was the first paragraph of what they read. So they read that researchers now predict that in 25 to 30 years, transgender people will be more common in occupations such as telemarketers, car salespeople, or lawyers. And then the other half of the people read that they would be overrepresented in occupations such as firefighters, nurses, and people working for pet rescue organizations. We ran a pilot study before that to identify occupational groups that were either really liked or really disliked. Hopefully you can guess which ones are which. So the idea was that if people read that transgender people would be overrepresented in the liked roles, so firefighters, nurses, and people working for pet rescue organizations, then maybe they would also like transgender people more in that society. And then we said that cisgender people were predicted to be particularly well represented in the other occupations. So if trans people were said to be more likely to be firefighters, nurses, and people working in pet rescue organizations, and cisgender people were said to be more likely to be telemarketers, car salespeople, and lawyers, and the other way around. And then to manipulate this gender violence association, we said that either women or men would be particularly common among bouncers, police officers, and among athletes such as boxers and hockey players. And then the other groups we said would be particularly well represented in occupations such as yoga instructor, florists, and massage therapists. And those were ones that were identified in that pilot study as being seen as particularly peaceful. And this time, yay, we managed to shift around this gender violence association. So what you can see here in this graph, you can see that in the peaceful men condition, so the two bars on the right, this gender violence association is lower than for the two bars on the left in the violent men condition. This also depended on the negative, which trans condition they were in. We're not really sure what was going on, but it seemed like that was particularly strong in the negative trans attitudes condition. We don't really know what's going on there because what we did not do, we did not successfully shift around trans attitudes with that attitude.
Okay, get to the Q&A.
So depending on what
This
occupation
sucks.
people were in.
Get to the Q&A
So we
already.
didn't manipulate attitudes. We clearly did something because it had an effect on this gender violence association, but we, based on the measures we have, cannot say what exactly that
You know what? At least the left is punishing themselves with this. The left might be doing crazy shit based off this information, but can we just agree that at least the left is punishing themselves by having to sit through this? They should be getting to the Q&A very soon.
did. And this is then what we find for the support for trans-inclusive policies. So most importantly, there was no effect of the peaceful man condition, even though we had successfully pushed around these male violence beliefs. If supporters, opponents of trans-inclusive policies were correct in what they're saying is driving their opposition, then we should see an effect here. We should see that the violent men condition has less, the people in the violent men condition, so on the two bars on the left, should be lower than the two bars on the right, but they are not. We do see this variation and this interaction with the trans attitudes condition, but overall we do not see this effect that people were saying, opponents said we should see. So there's no evidence that concerns around male violence are the main reason for the opposition to trans-inclusive policies. Instead, negative attitudes are a strong.
Hang on. I'm going to break up the monotony by sharing you a response to John Morgan, because John Morgan is getting the stalkers responding to him over the fan fiction. Do you guys want a John Morgan update? Hang on. Just for fun, and then we'll get into the Q&A. Just to break it up. So, John Morgan yesterday tweeted out this: FYI, a fan fiction is fiction. Fiction isn't real. Just because I wrote a fanfic where Carlin flogged James doesn't mean Carlin is having violent sexual fantasies. There wasn't even anything sexual about the fanfic anyway. Check out. Fanfic stands for fan fiction. Usually it's an amateur fiction set in a world and using characters of books and movies and video games, professionally produced and rights owned by others. The property right owners absolutely have the right to disallow fan fiction of their intellectual property, and some do. Others choose to allow it. It is not fan fiction to write a story about an actual living person. It's simply fiction. And there's a reason fiction authors include disclaimers that if their characters resemble actual people, it's a coincidence and not intentional. It's to protect themselves from being sued. Is anyone under the impression that I'm going to Sweden to join a Gnostic sex cult to whip James Lindsay? There's a reason people don't use a person's actual name unless publishing non-fiction. They're confident they can defend against a lawsuit. Writing fiction about a real person and putting it out on the internet is something that very much could get you sued. Either way, it's not a fanfic, and for Carlin to share it publicly means she could also be sued. It's disgusting and unethical. Yeah, I'm gonna get sued over the retweet of a fan fiction. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Well, if Jimmy chooses to sue me over the retweet of a fan fiction, then Jimmy's gonna get a nice little counter lawsuit for all the times he's accused me publicly of having personality disorders I don't have, with which to interfere in my business. So I'm not exactly scared of that. I am not exactly scared. And then John Morgan said, it's a fanfic of the movie Midsummer. It's not fiction if it is something involving real people. You're thinking of real person fiction, and people write those all the time on Wattpad and AO3. I'm not defaming them or making money off this fic either. And then this woman is such a psycho. This woman has been like stalking me for years, and now her whole life is falling apart. And she has no money, and she has no friends, and no one loves her because she spends all her time stalking me and has for years, and now her whole life is falling apart, and she has no job, and I don't feel bad for her at all because she's a raging fucking lunatic. And she said, who gave you the idea to write it? So what they're insinuating is, Carlin put you up to it, didn't she? Carlin told you to write a fan fiction. And John Morgan says, the movie Midsummer. We watched it in Carlin's Discord. Okay, but why, James? They have a history, and he and his wife have been made uncomfortable. No, you guys made James and his wife uncomfortable. I made a joke in private that was obviously a joke. You assholes dragged out a private DM conversation that was an obvious joke, pretended it was real, sent it to James's wife, freaked her the fuck out, and then dragged it all over the internet for years and years and years and years and years and years and years, and then you pretended it was my fault. No. I made a joke in private to someone who wasn't James, did nothing about it in person because it was a fucking joke that was made in private, and then you retards dragged it all over the internet for 3 fucking years. By the way, the joke is now 3 fucking years old. No one cares anymore. But no, you retards are still dragging it all over. Carlin has violent sexual like for 3 fucking years. Literally. 3 fucking years. Did you know about the sexualization of James by KB? And did you know that James and his wife have already stated she makes them uncomfortable? Then maybe you assholes should shut the fuck up about it. Imagine being upset by a joke from the game Fuck, Marry, Kill. Imagine being upset about that. Not only being upset about it when the joke got made, but then being upset about it 3 fucking years later. If James's wife is uncomfortable, it's because you retards made her uncomfortable. Dude, a lot of what James is saying about Carlin is lies because he's mad at Carlin for calling him out on giving wrong information to his audience, like the left being a Gnostic cult, and even stealing her work and others. Let's see if she responded to that. Of course she did, because she can't help herself. Are you sure? Is it possible that Carlin is the one lying? Have you independently looked at the backstory? Or are you just taking your word for it? Is there a reason so many people refuse to work for her? She has burnt every bridge. Yeah, I burnt every bridge. I burnt every bridge, and that's why I have like a great community and a ton of friends. Yeah, okay. No one likes Carlin. She has burnt every bridge. The common denominator is always her, not James. KB even accuses Ted Cruz of stealing her work. Well, Ted Cruz wrote a book called Unwoke a year after I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke. I don't think it's that much of a fucking leap. Just because someone says something similar doesn't mean they got it from her. She isn't the only person that come to these conclusions about social. In fact, I've heard her say something. John Morgan says, "Pretty sure. I think you need to look into it yourself. If you want to follow her, that's up to you. But don't get involved in her personal feuds and under no circumstances give her any personal information about you. She collects info on people and then blackmails them with it or straight up releases it to the public. If you ever start questioning her or you don't accept her explanations, expect a block." This woman is a psychopath. This woman used to come into my community Zoom calls and cry about how awful her life was, and we let her do it. And there were some people in my community that even felt so bad for her that they donated money to her so she could go get therapy. This went on for months and months and months. And then she lost her fucking shit. She never got therapy. She just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. She kept harassing me. She messaged me demanding I call her and talk to her on the phone because she had some sort of weird parasocial relationship with me. I said no. She got pissed off. She kept demanding that I talk to her on the phone. I don't talk to fucking anyone on the phone. No, a completely different woman. Completely different woman. And so then she lost her shit and she kept demanding I talk to her on the phone, and I said no, and I blocked her. And then she joined the horde of unhinged retards, and now today her life is completely falling apart. I know that because she tweeted about it. Life is completely falling apart. She has no job. She has no money. No one loves her. All this stuff. Gee, I can't imagine why. Maybe she should have gone to therapy when my community members literally offered to pay for her therapy. Anyway, that is our brief update, and now we're going back to boring. I hope everyone had a good gossip update. We have 15 minutes left of this presentation, guys. We're going to get through it. We're going to get through the Q&A, and then we're going to call it a day. And hey, at 9 p.m. tonight, we're going to be channeling Hitler. Surprise, surprise. I'll tell you more about that in a sec.
Predictor. And so for supporters of trans inclusive policies, the reasons that they give match the patterns in the data, but for opponents, they do not. And manipulating trans attitudes translates into changes in policy support, but manipulating male violence beliefs does not. So overall, there's little evidence that concerns for the safety of women play an important role here. And for me, what that really means is that it's important to look beyond the discourse and look at the underlying psychological factors. And that's what a lot of my work is doing. And I think also for activists, this is an important takeaway message, because we can address male violence concerns and why those don't make sense in this context all the livelong day, and that will probably not have any effect because that is not actually what is driving opposition. So what we need to focus on, I think, is changing attitudes. That's a hard thing to do. But I think that is really, I think just focusing on these overt arguments that are being made will unlikely lead to real change. I think that is my main takeaway from that research. And that's where I'm going to end. Thank you so much for your attention. Thanks for having me.
Q&A.
Looking forward to all your questions.
Thank you so much, Tekla, for joining us today and for sharing your research. We're going to move to Q&A for our last 10 to 15 minutes. If folks want to use the Q&A function on Zoom, and I can read out your questions. I'm going to start off with a question in the chat from Shirley. You spoke of pushing around and manipulating attitudes. Does that invite backlash against your work and other similar work?
Like me pushing that around in my work? Is that the question? Maybe I should look at the question. Sorry.
I think so. I don't know, Shirley, if you want to clarify at all, but it sounds to me that, yeah, pushing, manipulating attitude or pushing your work forward.
I mean, that's like, maybe that's also like a psychology language thing. We do that a lot. Like we try to make causal claims. We push around people's beliefs all the time. So not really. I mean, our participants themselves, like we inform them afterwards, and they do have the opportunity to withdraw their consent after they know what the study was actually about. So they could, if they're like pissed off that we like kind of like misled them and like made them like change their views, then they can withdraw their consent and we will not use their data. Very few people do that. This depends, like sort of, like in the like sort of in the reception of my work, this does not necessarily, like I've not really received much backlash for that, because I think it's just like a pretty normal thing we do in psychology. But
Hang on. I'd like them to address why people defend private property in terms of emotional needs if they have an alternative that isn't that doesn't matter at all here. I'd like them to address why people defend private property in terms of bro, this question is completely irrelevant to what's going on right now.
Sometimes when I do work, not so much with these, so these were all recruited via Prolific, which is this like website where you can just like recruit participants very easily and they get paid for their participation. And there it's fine. For some other studies, I've recruited more on social media and like specifically like sought out places that have a lot of gender critical feminists. And there, yeah, like people absolutely hate it, even if you don't push around anything, even if they just think, oh, you have an agenda here, then they
I'm curious how they would feel about Rachel Levine there in favor. Why wouldn't they be in favor?
They are pretty unhappy with that, and that has not been fun. But with these specific studies, it's been fine.
Great, thank you. And then another question in the Q&A box. Thank you for your interesting presentation, and I see a lot of gratitude coming in the chat as well for your work. Are there any studies or insights about people's comfort level with having transgender individuals in women's bathrooms versus men's bathrooms? It seems to me that the comparison would clarify how important the violent man concern truly is.
Yeah, there's very little, like that's just not something that's very prominent.
And what I said to account name is that question has no relevance to what we're talking about. So you're not going to hear it from me and you're not going to hear it from this person. So if like you need to reformat the question, because like as the question is asked, it has literally no relevance to anything that we're talking about. So
in the discourse
better
around
question.
that, I think there is something interesting there about like, why is that not? And if you process, so if you're saying that like people are the gender that matches their sex assigned at birth, if that is your worldview, then you should also be concerned about these transgender men who you should view as women going into the men's restroom because they would be at risk. And I think the fact that that is not a prominent part of discourse tells you a lot about that it's not about male violence, but that is not really something that has been investigated very much. So I don't really know of any studies looking at that specifically. And yeah, like the discourse doesn't really focus on that very much. I think if anything at all, I think what we find is kind of like this idea of like, oh, women need to be saved. We do see that also in the discourse around trans men, but more in the context of like young, like teenage, like kids and like young transgender men, this idea that they are actually women who are like being sort of seduced by this trans agenda and like talked into mutilating their bodies. So I think there's also this like rhetoric of like, oh, we need to save the women is pretty prominent in all, like for both trans men and trans women and non-binary people, but it takes on very different forms. And I think that actually tells us a lot, but definitely we need more research on that as well.
Great, thank you. I see a question from Hannah. Could attitudes towards trans people be related to beliefs around precarious manhood? I don't know, Hannah, if you want to elaborate on that at all.
That?
I mean, maybe this is the inverse, and that is to say it's more like, I mean, kind of ironically, the threat to men is more about the story here, you know? And I was just wondering, has anybody looked at, you know, variation in beliefs about precarious manhood, the need to, you should talk about it. I'm sure you know that. I'll leave it to you to answer that. Maybe the audience might want a little bit of an explanation of that. But do you have, do you know, I know of research related to that? I was thinking of it, looking at your results.
Yeah, so for those of you not familiar with that sort of literature, so the idea of precarious manhood is so across many cultures and many studies, it has been shown that manhood compared to womanhood is much more seen as something that has to be won and is more easily lost. So for example,
so is
men
it kind of like men have to like go through like a test of their manhood or something like that, and if they don't live up to like being a man, then they lose the status of manhood.
when you make them like do a feminine task such as braiding hair as opposed to just braiding a rope or something like that, and then like that threatens their manhood, and then in turn they would act more aggressively or punch something more harder to kind of restore their manhood. And one of the forms that can also take this restoring of manhood is sort of violence or negative attitudes towards gay men, for example. So as a group that sort of threatens men as in general.
So if like you're the type of man that like maybe you let another guy give you a blowjob after you've had too many drinks, and then you wake up the next day and you realize that may have been a little bit gay. I understand.
Threatens men's status because they don't adhere to these
straight men would never do that.
Norms.
It would never happen.
I don't know
just
if
made
any
that up.
research
That would
has
never
specifically
happen.
looked at this, but some of my data from another
Gay
project
men know that never happens.
also made me think about this. So in that project, we were interested in gender nonconformity and identity denial. So whether presenting in a way that is not in line with your gender identity, how that can cause people to perceive you as not a real man or not a real woman, and in turn like say like, oh, this person should use the women's bathroom even though they identify as a man, or like that person shouldn't be in these spaces that are in line with their gender. But both
I'm pretty sure I just sexually harassed Joseph based on the standards of the internet.
transgender and cisgender people, interestingly, we find the same patterns. So what we generally find is that people who don't present in line with their gender identity have their identity denied more often and not like assigned to the incorrect places. But how this ties with precarious manhood is that in one of the studies, we gave them these images. So for example, they saw a man who was wearing makeup, had long hair, was presenting in a very feminine way, but was saying, my name is James, I'm a guy who likes blah, blah, blah. So like they got information that this person identifies as a man. And then we asked them, to what extent would you say this person is a man? To what extent would you say this person is a woman? And then like, which spaces should this person use, or which should this person be allowed in like male only support groups and so on. So we just asked them all these kinds of questions. And what we found there was that only the extent to which people perceived people as men mattered for identity denial. So both for women and men, so male and female targets, or targets who identified as men and targets who identified as women, to what extent they were seen as women had nothing to do with which groups they were assigned to later on. So whether people said, oh, this person should go to the women's bathroom or the men's bathroom. Only perceptions of manhood mattered. And so that to me seems to suggest that there is like a precarious manhood and like something about manhood that's specific, or something that's specific to manhood, not so much about womanhood, that is going on in this like trans, in many questions related to trans people. But as far as I know, no one has looked at that explicitly.
Great, thank you so much. Another question comes through the chat. Were you able to control for the reasons for subjects' trans attitudes? In other words, do your findings change significantly based on whether trans attitudes are rooted in religion, culture, politics, etc.?
No, we didn't really ask about like why they oppose this. So we did not control for like religiosity or just general conservatism or anything like that. So yeah, we didn't have any of those measures in there. And it could be that those things play a role. We didn't look at that here.
Great, thanks. I think Hannah has another question. If you want to go ahead, Hannah.
Yeah, if it's okay for me to jump in, thank you. So Negan Tusi, I don't know if you've encountered her and her work. She does some work in the negotiation realm. They have some she and co-authors have some work in progress looking at if you're going to negotiate with someone who identifies as non-binary or cisgender, I guess. And what they're finding is that it doesn't matter to younger people, so on a college campus, but when they look at an older population, that
See, this is the point. This is the point. It doesn't matter to younger people if they're negotiating with someone who's non-binary. It only matters to older people. This is how they're going to eliminate gender, guys.
they're more comfortable with somebody. And so I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how I love your manipulation of kind of reflecting on a positive counter, and whether or not there's any other data on people who just through their lived experience have more opportunity
Yes,
for
we can,
positive
Hannah.
encounters, and whether that's having any effect on, say, political or behavior or attitudes toward policy.
Yeah, so both from studies that just show like, oh, do you have any family members, any friends, or like how many people do you know who are transgender, who are non-binary? Both that is related to more positive attitudes and more positive policy views, and also like sort of I think there was one study that actually had a real interaction, so not this imagined contact that I just described, but a real interaction with a trans woman, and that also had an effect. So there are studies, and the age thing is really interesting because I also like, I perceive this as a very strongly age-related thing, where like younger people are just much more comfortable with this, and are like have much more open ideas about gender and less rigid and less binary ideas, and like don't necessarily think gender and sex are so much related. So that is also what I perceive. I think there's also studies backing that up. But what I find really interesting, this is slightly off topic, but I just feel like this is so fascinating, and so I'm just going to share it anyway. So I have this study with like representative samples from the UK and the US, and these are like, and we asked people, are you a feminist or not? And so then we looked only at the feminists. So the feminists are not representative, but the sample they came from, where we just asked, are you a feminist? That was a representative sample. And we also asked that sample about their views on trans issues. And that was to age among feminists. It was like age was like, I mean, there was a correlation, but it was not strong. It was maybe 0.1 or something like that, like not a strong association at all. Whereas with other things, for example, their views on sex work strongly correlated with age, with like younger people having much more positive attitudes towards like the decriminalization of sex work than older people. With this trans issue, there was not a strong relationship, which I find interesting. And given that that's kind of contrast with what we find in general samples that aren't feminists, that also kind of leads me to believe that there's something different going on for feminists than for the general population.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for engaging with us today. Lots of healthy discussion in the chat.
Man,
and so
that sucked. That sucked. I'm sorry, guys. We sat through a boring one today, but we did it. And sometimes we have to sit through some boring ones in order to get to the good stuff. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. And sometimes we sit through a boring presentation and the whole presentation is boring. And then at the very end, they say something absolutely insane. And that's why we have to sit through all of them. That's why we do this. You win some, you lose some. So if it was a rough day for you, come back another day. It'll probably be better. We actually do sit through like less boring ones than we do like interesting ones. Most of the stuff we watch is pretty good, but you never know. See, conservatives, Zoomers aren't immune to this, despite you saying they're super based and that the pendulum is swinging thanks to them. Yeah, I mean, listen, it is true that there are some young men who are resisting this ideology. Women are still getting sucked into it, and guess what? Most of the young men want to fuck the young women, and so a lot of the young men are still go along with it. It's just the young men that like don't go along with it, they kind of stand out, so they break the pattern. It doesn't mean they're a significant number of people, it just means they stand out. Anyway, guys, that's gonna wrap it up for today. I'm gonna go fix my intro video so it says the correct name of the song. I feel so bad about that. I was working on making the video so hard. I fucked up the name of the song. Oh well, like I said, he will forgive me. I know that. I'm going to be back in about an hour and a half. And in about an hour and a half, Jennifer and I are going to be doing our regular Tuesday show. And we're going to be channeling Hitler tonight. Okay, we're not going to be channeling Hitler. I'm not going to be channeling Hitler. But we are going to be watching a channeled interview with Hitler. A new one that just came out not too long ago. We watched the older one a while ago, but there is a new channeling Hitler tonight for Disenrage. Yep, there's Disenrage tonight at 9 p.m. in about an hour and a half, 90 minutes. And we are going to, what Jennifer was was originally wanted to do some fairy thing and then she didn't have time to do it. So yeah, Fluffy Cow Respecter, it's happening. There's a new channeling Hitler video, and it's longer. It's a much longer interview with Hitler. And we're going to be watching it at 9 p.m. So everyone cross their fingers that Nick is late tonight. Nick's been pretty reliably lately. I mean, Nick is never late, of course, but Nick has been on time later in the evening lately. So if everyone crosses their fingers that Nick Fuentes is late tonight, we should have a good show. If not, everyone will go watch him and it'll be fine. And we're still going to watch Hitler either way, and people can watch Hitler later. Yeah, like everyone hope that Nick takes a nap. Let's hope that Nick goes and gets like some junk food or something, and then he falls asleep as Nick is prone to do. And then he wakes up later. And then he does his show later after we channel Hitler, okay? So I'm going to go take a little bit of a break. I will be back in about 90 minutes and we'll do the Hitler thing, guys. And as a reminder, if you do want to support the work I'm doing, please head over to the Substack, which is carlin.substack.com. There's lots of information over there, especially for you beginners. If you are a beginner, head over to the Woke 101 section of my Substack. This is going to have all your kind of like entry-level articles. You're going to have all sorts of topics in here. The latest is about why whiteness is not about skin color. We got the re-education series in there explaining all the basic stuff. I have a massive, massive archive of these articles, so you can go in there, find everything that you need. I don't know why this is doing this lately. Why is my Woke 101 section not... Substack is being weird lately. Anyway, you can head over there, and if you want to support the work I'm doing, I am completely 100% funded by you guys, so sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be back in about an hour and a half. Take care, guys, and we'll see you soon. Bye.